Hey there, Halloween lovers and garden ghouls. Welcome back to the Prop Agenda channel, where we mix creepy charm with DIY magic. Today I've got something vine-tastically spooky in store for you. We're building a pumpkin vine archway, just in time to haunt your front yard with festive flair. Whether you're creating a mystical path for trick-or-treaters or crafting a ghostly garden gate, this project is the perfect blend of rustic, eerie, and enchanting. So grab your pumpkins, prep your vines, and light those lanterns because Halloween is creeping closer and we're making an entrance they'll never forget. I was commissioned to create a display entrance for my local zoo's Sleepy Hollow exhibit. This is the same exhibit I had also created the Headless Horseman torso for. You can check out that tutorial as well on my channel. For the entrance, they wanted an archway made up of vines and pumpkins for the guests to walk through. Besides being creepy in the daytime, it had to light up at night as well. I spent 2 weeks making it, and the following video shows my build process. To begin, I needed a support structure to attach the vines and pumpkins to. I decided to build the frame out of 1.5 inch PVC pipe. This would make the entire arch to be light enough to be disassembled and carried, but strong enough to support the weight of the vines and pumpkins. I mapped out the dimensions of the frame to be about 8 feet tall and 7 feet wide. This would allow enough room for the families to walk under, but feel free to use your own dimensions when building your arch. I built the main structure using strategically placed T-connectors and 45-degree connectors to support the sides and top of the frame. Instead of using PVC glue, I just press-fitted the pipes into the connectors and reinforced that with screws. This would allow anyone to simply unscrew the sections to disassemble it for storage. The only caveat is making sure not to cover the screws with the vines. Once built, I wrapped the entire frame with 80mm shrink wrap to have a good base for attaching the vines and to blend the vines with once the pipes were painted. Next came the vine creation. The vines were made from a ton of pool noodles ranging in size from 2 inches to 4 inches in diameter. While you could get away with using just regular 2-inch diameter pool noodles from Dollar Tree, which is where I got mine, I also happen to have several 4-inch diameter thicker noodles I used on the sides of the frame to beef up the overall size of the archway. To create the vines, I created a custom vine holder made out of PVC pipe attached to a wooden base that I could slide the noodle onto while I cut, shrink wrapped, and painted. After sliding the pool noodle onto the holder, I would split the noodle down the middle into 2 or 3 sections. I would then taper each section to make sections of the vine. I used a bit of heat to shape the vines and arch out the outlying sections. It was now time to texture the vine, and I did that by adding 80mm shrink wrap to the noodle. This involved doing an initial wrap around the body of the vine, out to the different sections, as well as supporting the middle fork of the vine with additional plastic. I would continue to add texture to the vine by placing vertical folded pieces in layers to give the vine more depth, as well as making the sections more pointed at the ends. I highly recommend wearing at least one thick glove to help press the heated plastic to itself. This stuff can get very hot, and getting molten plastic on your bare skin is not fun. I also created thorn sections by adding folded and heated pieces of shrink wrap in the shape of giant thorns to the sides of the pool noodles. Another way you can create separate sections of vine on pool noodles without splitting them down the middle is to heat weld pieces onto each other to create thickness, attach additional vine pieces, or add sections of thorns. To do this, just cut the noodle at a slant and heat up both edges at the same time as you press them together. The heat will melt the pool noodle just enough to meld with the other noodle, and the bond is very strong. Once you make your sections this way, you can texture them with the shrink wrap. I use the same method of using shrink wrap to attach the sections of vines to the PVC frame. Remember when we wrapped the frame with shrink wrap? This allows you to use heat and additional vines in various places and start building out the shape of the archway. At some point during your build, you're going to need to start adding pumpkins in various locations around the arch. But first, you need to acquire the pumpkins. I bought my pumpkins at Michael's. I bought 4 of each size, small, medium, and large, adding up to 12 pumpkins. To get more bang for my buck, I cut the pumpkins in half to get 24 pumpkins altogether. I also bought a couple of skulls from the Dollar Tree to fill in the spaces and to give a more gothic feel to the whole arch. To begin the carving process, I cut along the seam line of each pumpkin. I drew various funny and scary faces on each pumpkin and used an X-Acto blade, ratchet blade, and heat knife. The sky is the limit on how to draw your faces and cut them, so don't hold back. Once the faces were carved, I cleaned up the edges by trimming with the X-Acto blade or using a file and sandpaper to clean up the lines. I then used alcohol to remove the marker left over from the cut. Since I knew I was going to have to light up the pumpkins, I added black EVA or craft foam to the backs of the pumpkin halves. I also cut a small hole in the back so I could later add the light strings. The black foam would darken the inside of the pumpkin and allow less light to escape. To attach the pumpkins, I used strips of the shrink wrap again. I helped to adhere the shrink wrap to the edges by spraying a bit of Super 77 spray adhesive to the side of the pumpkins. I then wrapped the edges of the shrink wrap around the PVC or the noodles and reinforced the sides with more heated shrink wrap. Don't worry about the edges of the shrink wrap showing. We're going to blend those edges in with the vines with paint. For the base layer of paint on the vines, I decided to use a black paint to give the vines more depth after weathering them. I decided on using flat black Rustoleum spray paint to both prime and paint the vines. I've also used black latex exterior paint as well in a sprayer. I've never had any issues with paint peeling with either type of paint, whether it was the enamel or latex, and this arch has been out in all types of weather for several years. I don't recommend trying to brush the paint on, as it will be harder to get into the nooks and crannies of the textured shrink wrap. To weather the vines, I used a tan exterior latex paint to bring out the high spots of the texture. I would add a little paint to the brush, dab a majority of the paint onto a towel, and then lightly brush the remaining paint on the high edges of the textured shrink wrap. This really brought out the depth of the texture. Now you could just leave the vines like this and make it seem like the vines were more birch-like, but I decided to take it one step further. I added a layer of Minwax Early American wood stain over the entire archway. This darkened the tan highlights and brought the entire look of the vines together with the pumpkins. I also added stain to the skulls to blend them in better with the vines. A final polyacrylic coat was sprayed over the entire archway to seal the paint. I apply this every season to make sure the paint stays weatherproof, but there may be an occasion where you will have to reapply on certain sections. In that case, just follow the order of black base, tan dry brushing, stain, and seal. The final step was to add lights to the archway. I found a 50-foot set of orange programmable LED lights from Big Lots. May you rest in peace. I wound the rope of lights around the archway in various places and stuck them into the pumpkins into the holes I'd previously prepared. And voila, the archway is finished. This archway has been a great attraction for young and old as they come to visit the zoo, and a creepy centerpiece to the Sleepy Hollow attraction. Well, that's it for now. Hopefully I've given you enough information to get started on your own pumpkin archway. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you can stay notified of upcoming videos. And make sure finding time to be creative is on your agenda.